I'm Joe from Homegrown Musician, and if you hadn't already gathered, today's video is going to be all about chords. So what are chords in music? So really simply put, chords in music are any two or more notes played together at the same time. Well, that's the end of the video. I'm really glad you enjoyed. Please leave a like, share, subscribe, as it would massively help the channel. Thank you for watching. Yeah, no, it's not the end of the video. So I'm going to be splitting today's video into three distinct sections. So we'll be talking about the basics of chords and their mechanics, so how they work. We're going to be talking about some common chords that you'll come across frequently, and we'll talk about chords in major and minor keys. So that actually relates to last week's video, and if you haven't seen that, I'll leave it here or down in the description. What are chords? So in the simplest terms, all a chord is two or more different notes played together at the same time. So that can either be by one instrument that can play multiple notes, like a piano for example, or across an entire band. But it's just two or more different notes played together at the same time. Easy peasy. So to find out which chord's being played, you need to look vertically in a piece of music because it's to do with pitch. So what you do is you look across all the parts in a piece of music and identify which notes they're playing. You then look at the distances between the notes, or the intervals if you want to use the correct term, and you use that information to find out which chord's being played. So chords are just a harmonic moment in a piece of music. So it's not about the length of the chord per se, so it could be really short and only last a beat, or a chord could be really long and last for 1,000 bars. As long as the vertical notes don't change, the chord remains the same. So for the sake of this video, I'm only going to be discussing 3-note root position triad chords. So whilst that sounds quite complicated, they're probably the most basic chords that you can actually get, but that doesn't mean they're not important, because they're also probably the most common kind of chord that you'll actually get. So if you understand these chords, you have a really good grounding to develop and understand chords in the future. So how do you make 3-note triad chords? So as the name suggests, there are 3 key ingredients: the root note, the third note, and the 5th note. So we'll start with the root. So the root note is by far the most important. It's the core fundamental note that your ear hears and associates with that chord. So for example, if you chose C to be your root, your chord would be a C something chord. If you chose E flat to be your root, your chord would be an E flat something chord. F to be your root, your chord would be an F something chord, etc, etc. It's the core of the note, and it's the most fundamental note in the chord. So the next ingredient is the third. So we have 2 kinds of thirds in music: minor thirds and major thirds. So if you wanted to build a minor triad, you choose a minor third, which is 3 semitones, and you'd add that to your root. If you wanted to build a major triad, that's 4 semitones, and you'd add that to your root to get your next note, which is the third. Now the third is the second most important note in the chord, as it actually decides the sound of the chord, because like I said, if you were to choose a minor third, that would actually make a minor triad eventually, which, like I said, sounds slightly sadder. If you were to choose a major third, that would turn the chord into a major triad eventually, which sounds slightly happier. The final ingredient to a triad is the 5th. So this is always 7 semitones, or a perfect 5th, away from the root. So not away from the third, the distance is away from the root. So the 5th is still an important note in the chord, but ultimately it's not as important as the third and the root, which working together give us the sound of our chord. The 5th just helps to fill it out a bit. And with those 3 notes, our triad is actually complete. So here's what a minor triad sounds like in full, and here's what a major triad would sound like in full. So you could split the 3 notes up and play them across 3 different instruments or in 3 different registers, or you could actually jumble the order up and you could play them in a different inversion. Now this is called chord voicing, and it's slightly more complex, so I'm not going to go into any more detail, but I just wanted to address it in case anybody asked about it in the comments below. So the last thing I want to talk about is actually chords and keys. So to avoid repeating myself from last week's episode, which I'll link to below, all a key is a collection or a group of notes that you can choose from in order to help keep a piece of music sounding focused. So if we can do that with notes, surely it only makes sense that we can do that with chords, and you'd be right in thinking so. So I'll explain that now. So to figure out which chords go with the key, all you need to do is build a triad on each note of any given key, only using other notes from the same key. Now that sounds quite complicated, but it's actually quite easily explained in practice, so we'll give it a go now. So for this example, I'm going to be using C major because it's the easiest key to read, as it has no sharps or flats. So we have a C major scale laid out in front of us, and we're going to build a triad on each of these notes, only using other notes from the C major scale. Once we've done this, this will give us a big list of chords that will work well in C. So we'll start on our tonic note of C. So the first step would be to get the third. In this case, obviously we move up to the third note of the scale, which is E. So like I said, normally you'd either move a minor third or a major third, depending on which chord you want to make, but because we're in C major, we don't have that option, so we have to use the E given to us. We then go back to C and move up a fifth, which would give us G. This gives us our first chord, which obviously is C major. That definitely works very well in a C major scale. So we'd repeat the process with our second note, which is D. So we'd start on D, and that gives us our root note. We then move up a third to get F, which gives us our third, obviously. We go back to D, move up a fifth, and that'll give us our fifth note, which is A. Repeat the process with E, F, G, the A, and the B, and it will give you this comprehensive list of chords. Now, all of these chords are either major chords or minor chords, except for the B, which is a diminished chord, but we can ignore that for now. So we can actually use exactly the same process for a C minor scale. So we'd list out the C minor scale in front of us and build a triad upon each of the different scale degrees, and that would give us this list of chords. So below each of the chords, as you can see, I've labelled them with a Roman numeral and a letter. So the letter is obviously the name of the chord, with big letters meaning major chords and small letters meaning minor chords, and the Roman numeral is the scale degree for each chord, with large Roman numerals being major chords and small Roman numerals being minor chords. The chords with the circles around them are diminished chords, but like I said, you can ignore those for the time being because they work slightly differently. But that's pretty much how that works. If you want to know which chords work well with the key you're currently in, write out the key and build a triad upon each of the degrees only using notes from that key, and it'll give you a big list of chords that are definitely going to go well with the key. So using a little bit of logic and deduction, you have a big list of chords that go really well with the key you're in, so by default, all other chords must create certain tensions. Now that sounds like it could be a bad thing, but actually tension in music can be really effective. So if you want a tense point in your song, don't reach to the chords in the key, reach to the chords out of the key, and you could use it as a really good musical device. So that neatly brings us to the end of today's video. So this really isn't everything to do with chords. They get way more complicated, way more interesting, way fruitier. They're great. However, hopefully this will give you a bit of a basic understanding into how the fundamentals of chords actually work. So a quick overview. All a chord is two or more different notes played together at the same time. It's that simple. We get common chords like triads, which crop up very often, particularly major chords and minor chords. Now, just like with notes in a key, certain chords in a key actually work quite well, and to figure out which chords do and don't go with keys, the easiest way to do it is to write out a big list of all the notes in that key and build a triad on each one of them, only using respective notes from the said key. And hopefully this will give you a big comprehensive list of chords that will go well, and then by default all of the other chords that you can use will create a sort of tension, which can either be good or bad. If you enjoyed today's video, give me a comment below, and please remember to like, share and subscribe as it would massively help out the channel.